Today I have a Disney flashback video for you, and we are flashing back to 1986, and we're going to be talking about The Great Mouse Detective. I believe I saw this one as a kid, or at least that's how I felt at the beginning of the movie, but if I did, it was probably only once. We don't begin with an opening credits sequence for this one. The movie immediately opens and on screen says London, 1897. Next, we see Flaversham's toys, and we cut to a father and daughter mouse. The father is a toy maker. Then, a creepy figure appears outside. At this point, I couldn't quite make out what it was from what they showed. The toy maker tells his daughter to hide, and the creature breaks in and starts attacking the toy maker. When the girl comes out, her father is gone. Next, we have the opening music and title credits. It's the eve of the Diamond Jubilee for the Queen. Olivia is the little girl's name. She's found in the streets by another mouse. She tells him she must find Basil of Baker Street so he can help her find her father. The man tells her he doesn't know any Basil, but he does know where Baker Street is, and that he would try to help her. As far as I could remember at this point, the movie was based on Sherlock Holmes. They do manage to find Basil's house, but he's not there. His housekeeper invites them in and makes Olivia tea and crumpets. Meanwhile, they notice lots of interesting contraptions around them. In runs a funny-looking mouse that turns out to be Basil of Baker Street, wearing a disguise. Olivia is trying to tell him that she's in trouble and needs his help, and he's telling her to hold on, blowing her off while he runs around the room tending to other things. Dawson is the name of the other mouse who is helping Olivia. It is confirmed that this is based on Sherlock Holmes when Basil uses his deduction skills and says, "It's elementary, my dear Dawson." Olivia is trying to get him to listen to her, and he tells her this is really an inopportune time. "Why don't you ask your mother where he is?" as in her missing father. She responds, "I don't have a mother." He then feels bad and seems to sympathize with her, but then says, "Now see here, I have no time for lost fathers." Olivia responds, "He's not lost. He was taken by a bat," which is what I thought it might be in the beginning, but I wasn't positive. Then Basil gets excited and says, "Did you say a bat? Did it have a crippled wing?" She tells him, "I don't know, but it had a peg leg." Then Basil reveals to them that the bat works for the man he's been trying to track down. His nemesis, Professor Rakuten. Basil said, "He's a genius twisted for evil." Now we cut to Ratigan's lair, where he is forcing Flaversham, or Olivia's father, to work and create things for him. Flaversham tells Ratigan he won't help him carry out his plan, and he can do what he wants with him. He won't be part of his evil any longer. Then Ratigan threatens his daughter, saying he's going to have her brought here, and he tells him to finish it. Fidget is the bat's name, and Ratigan gives him a list of tasks to complete, including getting the girl. Ratigan's plan is to sabotage the Queen's Jubilee and become the supreme ruler of all mousedom. Then he sings a song which I didn't see coming. I thought this was going to be one without music, but it did have a few songs here and there. Mostly, I think Ratigan sang most of them. When someone doesn't fall in line and go along with what Ratigan wants, he has a pet cat, which I found odd, a rat having a pet cat, but that's Disney for you. But he feeds the mouse that wasn't cooperating to the cat. Basil and Dawson are going to rescue her father, and Basil tells Olivia under no circumstances is she going with them. Evidently, she finds some way to convince him because the next thing we know, they are headed out and Olivia is with them. They then enter the home of Sherlock Holmes the human. Toby is a big dog that Basil knows. I assume he's Sherlock's dog since it is in his house. Basil says how Toby has an amazing nose. After the introductions, Basil gives Toby the scent and description of the bat and tells Olivia her father is as good as found. He then tells Toby to sick him, as in the bat. Toby goes running off and sniffing, and the mice ride on him. Next, we cut to the bat in the toy shop, checking off his list of items to get. He says he didn't get the girl and erases it from the list. Then Toby shows up outside, so the bat drops the list. After some looking around, Dawson finds the list. Basil shushes him and tells him he's trying to concentrate. Then a bunch of toys start to move and make music or noise, depending what kind of toy they were. I think the bat must have set them off to create a distraction. Olivia starts chasing some bubbles and then goes to check out another toy. That's when Fidget grabs her and stuffs her in a bag. Basil and Dawson try to go after her, but Fidget starts to launch all kinds of toys at them. He manages to get away with Olivia. Basil begins to blame Dawson, saying he wasn't watching the girl, until he sees that Dawson is upset and blaming himself, and then Basil is kinder. He tells him, "It's not all that bad, and we'll get her back. Anything is possible." Next, Rakuten shows the toy maker that he has his daughter. Olivia runs to her father and hugs him. Rakuten separates them and threatens the toy maker that he'd better finish. Rakuten is checking that the bat got everything on the list, only to discover Basil is on the case. He's not happy and feeds Fidget to his cat, but then changes his mind and instead comes up with a plan to do something to Basil. A little side note here, the voice of Flaversham the toy maker sounded very familiar to me, especially with the accent. So I looked it up to make sure, and it is the same voice actor as Scrooge McDuck, and that is a very distinct voice, had a very distinct accent, and was indeed the same voice. It seems like at times Basil is focused on the wrong things or things that don't really matter, but it eventually leads him to a good conclusion that does help them with solving clues or getting closer to where they want to be. So at first he kind of seems like he's totally off base, like what is he talking about, what is he doing? But eventually he comes around to, oh, okay, that's where you were going with that, and now we have these clues or this new information. Basil and Dawson go to a bar on the riverfront and wear disguises. Basil's is pretty normal, but for some reason Dawson is dressed like a pirate and his clothes don't fit. I think they are both supposed to be pirates, but Dawson's disguise was much more obvious. They are trying to be low-life ruffians, as they put it, as that's the type to hang out at this place. Basil is even disguising his accent. He asks about Rakuten, and everyone in the place turns to look in shock. But the barmaid he is asking tells him she never heard of him. Later, we see the barmaid whispering something to the bartender, and he slips a liquid into the beers. When she delivers them to Basil and Dawson, she says they are on the house. Before Basil has a chance to tell Dawson they've been drugged, as in the beers have been drugged, he's already chugged his down. They then run into Fidget, but when Basil looks up, he sees that Dawson is up on the stage dancing with the performers. Then Dawson passes out as fighting is going on around him, so that was a pretty strong, fast-acting drug they gave him. Basil grabs Dawson and they follow Fidget. They find Ratigan's secret lair and see who they think is Olivia trapped in a bottle. They are trying to save her, but then they see it's actually Fidget dressed in the same clothes. Then everyone yells, "Surprise!" and they drop a banner that says, "Welcome, Basil!" They were waiting for him. Ratigan is chastising Basil and tells him the superior mind prevailed and he's won. Next, cut to Basil and Dawson in a mousetrap. Ratigan tells them he thought of so many ways for them to meet their demise, and he couldn't choose, so he's decided to use them all. He set up a contraption with axes, guns, and other ways of killing them. He then thanks Flavisham for his handiwork. At the same time, he's setting his plan in motion for the Queen's Jubilee. Because of this, he has to leave before they meet their demise, but he has set up a camera to capture the moment. Fidget and the fake guards bring the Queen a present. It's a mechanical robot version that looks exactly like the Queen. Flavisham is there controlling it, and Professor Ratigan shows up. The Queen tells the guards to seize him, but since they are Ratigan's men, they instead take the Queen away. Dawson gives Basil an idea when it comes to the trap. Basil starts to do some physics calculations and manages to malfunction the trap so it doesn't kill them and instead releases them and Olivia. Then they smile for the camera. Next, we cut to the fake Queen coming out. She's giving a speech to the people and introduces Ratigan as her new royal consort. All the spectators are shocked. Meanwhile, Fidget is trying to offer the real Queen up to the cat. Basil recruits Toby to help take them to Buckingham Palace. The new royal consort Ratigan says he has a few slight suggestions while simultaneously unrolling a scroll a mile long containing all his suggestions. Just as the cat is about to eat the Queen, Basil shows up and rescues her. Then Toby chases the cat. Ratigan is telling people there will now be a tax for the elderly, crippled, and children. The people think this is outrageous and he can't do this, but he responds, "I have the power. I reign supreme," and the fake Queen is just agreeing and going along with everything he says, and somehow people haven't figured out she's a fake yet. A bit later, Basil and Dawson and the Queen come to Flavisham's rescue, and Basil takes over the fake Queen's control, saying all kinds of things to make Ratigan angry. Basil calls for him to be arrested, and then a fight breaks out. Fidget has Olivia, and then Ratigan grabs her and tells the others to stay where they are or the girl dies. As soon as they leave, they chase after them anyway. Ratigan is in his blimp, and Basil uses some balloons and a flag to create a makeshift hot air balloon and chase after them. Fidget is pedaling the blimp, and he is exhausted from trying to get away. He says they should lighten the load, meaning throw Olivia over, and Ratigan says, "Oh, you think we should lighten the load?" and throws Fidget over instead. Ratigan begins pedaling, and Basil jumps on board. Ratigan isn't looking where he's going and runs into a clock tower. They wind up inside the clock with the gears, but the gears of the clock are turning. And just in the nick of time before getting crushed, Basil saves Olivia. She manages to get on the balloon with her father, but Ratigan kept chasing after them and fights with Basil on the edge of the clock. Meanwhile, it has started storming, because as if they didn't have enough to deal with, now there's a storm. Ratigan knocks Basil off and yells, "I won!" But Basil managed to grab hold of the balloon and sets the clock off, knocking Ratigan off. So he does something to make the clock go, which knocks Ratigan off of it. As he's doing this, he's saying, "On the contrary, the game's not over yet." But Ratigan grabs him on his way down, taking him with him. Somehow, Basil manages to get the pedal propeller from the blimp and fly back up to the others. Next, we cut to Dawson going over a newspaper article where they were thanked by the Queen. Basil says, "All in a day's work, Doctor," as in Dr. Dawson. Olivia says bye to Basil and that she will never forget him. He tells her he won't either. Dawson is getting ready to leave, and as he is, there is a knock at the door. It's someone looking for the famous Basil of Baker Street. Dawson tells her it is, and that it looks like she's in some kind of trouble. She says she is, and he replies, "You've come to precisely the right place." Basil then says, "Allow me to introduce my trusted associate, Dr. Dawson, whom I do all my cases with. Isn't that right, Doctor?" Dawson shakes his hand and says yes. Dawson ends the movie by saying he and Basil worked many cases together over the years, but he will always look back at the first case with fondness, as it was his first introduction to Basil of Baker Street, the great mouse detective. And after watching this, it was hard for me to remember if I had watched it because it wasn't super memorable to me, but then again, if I watched it when I was young once many years ago, it wouldn't be super memorable, so I'm not really sure about that. It was a cute, entertaining story, but as with some other recent ones, I wouldn't say it was a favorite. So while I enjoyed it and it entertained me, it's not a favorite that I want to rewatch over and over again. I hope you enjoyed this Disney flashback video. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. Let me know your favorite Disney movie of all time down in the comments. I'll talk to you soon, and I hope you have a magical day. Bye!